Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Top 10 edition of Magic Mike's, proudly sponsored by our Patreon supporters and CoolStuffInc.com, where you can find cool stuff in stock every day, and our co-sponsor CardHoarder.com, offering the best inventory prices and delivery of cards for Magic Online. I am Evan Irwin. We get started each week by saying hello to my two co-hosts, Aaron Campbell.
We are serving fish today.
Ruben Bressler.
Hi, I can't possibly have topped that intro. Make me follow that. Unbelievable.
It's pretty good. We are certainly getting fishy up in here with Merfolk. It's time for the top 10 Merfolk, in our opinion. Well, we also begin with our choice of the top comment from last week in a segment we call Honorable Mention, where Ruben will tell us who was the most luxuriant and letting us know what card we did not choose as one of our top 10 Guilds of Ravnica cards. Ruben?
Well, this comment certainly wasn't fishy from Cristiano Godinho on YouTube, who writes, I cannot believe you've neglected to include Affectionate Indrik in your lists. It makes me sad. You know who else is sad? The Indrik. What's not to like? It's cute. It caresses people. It pushes them off ledges. It's a green fatal push. Please give the Indrik some love. That's all it needs.
Aww.
Wow.
Indrik's also the card that we got hung up the most. If you had a chance to watch our blooper reel from our Guilds of Ravnica set review, we spent a good 10 minutes just trying to get through. And that was the first card from the green portion of the set review. And we spent a good 10 minutes because usually by the last video, we're pretty slap happy.
Pretty loopy. Yeah.
Most of the blooper reel was just us trying to get through the Indrik section and just not being able to do it.
We tried hard. I mean, it's got cats in it. I mean, I assure you, this was my number 11.
That card is so unique and interesting of how do we make a 6-mana 4/4 that fights something flavorful? And then they came up with it being adorable to a fault. That's the way they went with it. And that's just fantastic work.
That was amazing. A little weird to mention guardrails in the worlds of Magic. You know, in some cases, I'm like, did we
got guardrails, we got coffee, we've got Mizium, you know.
Which apparently exists. Well, for those who are not aware, Affectionate Indrik is a green and 5 generic mana for a 4/4 uncommon beast, and when it enters the battlefield, it may fight a creature you don't control as it caresses it to death.
Yep. The hug of death.
It's very good. So thank you very much, Cristiano, getting in touch with us. I was thinking about this. I believe the best way to get in touch with us for any prizes in the future is to message the mods on the Magic Mike subreddit. Because we're the mods on the Magic Mike subreddit.
Right.
Therefore, we can coordinate giving this stuff away. Whether I get it or you get it or whatever, we'll figure it out.
Interesting.
So that would be a nice avenue to use. Please do if you have it. And if you're not following our subreddit, well, now you can, can't you? But we have to move on here to a top 10 list of which I am only going to participate in about halfsies. Exactly halfsies. Literally every even number has been taken by someone else.
Even Irwin?
Even me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hashtag even Irwin.
Yep, still even in it. But yeah, so that means I have no number 10, so I couldn't kick this list off even if I wanted to. Aaron?
Even Irwin if you wanted to.
Yep. Aaron, what is your number 10?
I have a feeling that if people nowadays were to look at my number 10, they might say that it breaks the color pie. It's a very old card that does things that blue, isn't really known for doing, just flat out destroying creatures. Blue is very good at either just tapping creatures down or sort of freezing them, these sort of frost titan type effects, or they're good at bouncing creatures with things like, Echoing Truth, boomerang type effects. But it's very rare that you see blue just destroy something without there being something in return, like you see like a Pongify or something like that. But just raw destruction is very unusual for blue. And so it's a very old school card that just does things that we really don't attribute with blue. Not to mention it mentions something with the land walk, which is also something we don't really see anymore. And so it just hits a lot of older notes, and that's one of the reasons why I love it. My number 10 is Merfolk Assassin. So Merfolk Assassin is from the dark. It costs 2 blue pips. It's a 1 power, 2 toughness creature, and you tap it to destroy a target creature that has island walks, which is flat out destroys a creature, and specifically a creature that has island walk. It's very easy for Merfolk to gain island walk, which I'm sure we'll talk about in this episode. And, if you yourself have islands, it can be very difficult to deal with those creatures because you can't block them. But to have a thing that destroys the other things that you might be having a problem with is really, really unique. This was also reprinted in Future Set, I believe, or one of the Time Spirals.
It was time shifted in Time Spiral.
There we go. Yeah. And so just a really neat little card. The art is very old school as well, from an artist named Denise Detwiller, which I haven't heard of in years. And so everything about it's just very old school, which is why I love it.
Yeah, welcome to the Dark's color pie where everything's made up and the mana don't matter. Because Merfolk Assassin is just a weird, strange oddity from the Dark, which most things from the Dark are, honestly. It contains some of the worst Magic cards ever made. And yet this one was reprinted in Time Spiral because
it was also reprint. It was an uncommon in the Dark and then reprinted along with another Dark uncommon that comboed with it named War Barge. Which allowed you to give target creature island walk, and so you sort of had this War Barge Merfolk Assassin machine gun that you could assemble, which I thought was very adorable. Dennis Detwiller is most famous, of course, for his Squire art.
Well, I think it's Denise, isn't it, Denise?
Is it Denise?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay, whatever. Most famous for the Squire art that they produced. So yeah, just a weird card. I've certainly destroyed some opposing Merfolk with Merfolk Assassin as well.
They brought back a non-zero amount of cards from the Dark to Time Spiral. It's kind of
I love it.
Kind of weird. Well, I mean, there was the feeling of getting Squire as your time shifted rare.
Yeah,
like that literally happened.
That was a little weird.
It was bad and odd. Ruben, what's your number 10?
So there have been only about 200, a little more than 200 Merfolk ever printed in the history of Magic, which is a low number. And only 4 of them have ever won a Pro Tour. And maybe the weirdest one to ever win a Pro Tour was part of the Solution, a deck that Zvi Mauschwitz used to win Pro Tour Tokyo in 2001. The metagame of that tournament was a lot of red-green, a lot of Grixis colors as well. Dave Williams made the top 8 of that tournament with a deck called DC-10. Chris Benefell obviously made the top 8 of that tournament as well, playing that red-green deck that had things like Physic and Flametongue Kavu was all over the place. And the Solution was the solution to the metagame, and it featured a bunch of creatures that had protection from red, including Crimson Acolyte and Voice of All, and of course, Galena's Knight. Galena's Knight is a 2/2 for a white and a blue. It's a common from Invasion. It's a Merfolk Knight, and it has protection from red. And that is the extent of what it does. The Solution was a deck, a really interesting point in deck building. People hadn't really done something quite the way that Zvi did, where it was the entire deck was built to attack one strategy, one color. And no one had really tried that before. And it worked out in his favor, and he ended up winning the tournament.
Wow. I mean, sometimes you have these sort of very Scalpel-esque cards that do exactly what you need to do in exactly the right way. And sometimes they line up just perfectly.
Yeah, and the Solution was again, it was like a one weekend kind of a deck, a one weekend kind of a metagame Scalpel, and never really did anything, but didn't need to do anything after that. It was good enough at the Pro Tour.
I mean, it did what it needed to do. He attacked the exact angle that needed to be attacked. And that's why Zvi is part of the Hall of Fame. And we're not. All right. So let's move on here to number 9. Ruben, what's number 9?
My number 9 is a much more recent card. They recently gave green access to Merfolk in the Ixalan expansions. And one of the most powerful and potent of them allows you to explore not once, but twice. My number 9 is the Jade Light Ranger.
Ooh.
Jade Light Ranger is a colorless, a green for a Merfolk Scout. It's a 2/1 when it enters the battlefield. It explores, then it explores again. This has seen play as sort of a card advantage-ish kind of engine, as well as just a big stompy monster. As a 4/3 for 3 is fine. A 3/2 that draws a card is fine, and a 2/1 that draws 2 cards also quite fine. You may remember that Red-Green Monsters was popular for a little while back in early 2018. Tyler Schroeder won Grand Prix Memphis with Jade Light Rangers fighting alongside Rekindling Phoenixes. It's also seen play in all manner of, Winding Constrictor decks and various green-based aggro all over the place. Even Stompy is playing it now. And it's just a really, really, really good card.
It also fits in really nicely with the Golgarian standard. I was playing a Muldrotha list the other day, which was running a set of these, and I've seen a couple other decks. The Gruesome Menagerie decks, I believe they're called, have also been running this because it gives you a way to feed your graveyard, and at worst, it's just a beater, and you can even bring the beater back. If you play that card, and you're able to choose your 1 power, your 2 power, your 3 power. That's a neat little thing you can do too. And so, not only was it good in the previous standard, but it fits in nicely with what people are trying to do in the current standard as well.
I mean, it's card advantage when green doesn't usually get that much.
Right.
And it's also one of those cards that's kind of hard to explain to a new player because they're like, but I just, all I got was 2 lands. That didn't, that's a 2/1. And like, you're like, but you drew 2 cards. And like, but they're just lands. I'm like, but they're still cards.
There's still cards.
You're still up that amount of resources. So that's a thing. We still live currently in a world where Alex Bertoncini can go to the Pro Tour and has signed Jade Light Rangers before, and that just
Really?
Oh yeah,
Wow.
because of 2 Explorers. So he was staying on brand until all of a sudden it wasn't very good to be on brand anymore.
Right.
But Jade Light Ranger as a card right now, again, being seen in mono green Stompy, one of the best Merfolk in terms of card advantage engines is great. All right, so Aaron, what is your number 9?
My number 9 used to be a staple in the modern Merfolk decks and really doesn't see a lot of play anymore, which is a shame because I think it provides something very unique for the Merfolk decks. It just reeks of Zendikar. When you look at specifically what it does, Zendikar is the block that introduced us to, fetch lands, I believe, And so when you're doing a lot of fetching, you're obviously doing a lot of shuffling. Which makes this card very, very important. And I think, looking at this card, I really had to think, when I first looked at it, it seemed almost underwhelming. But then when I really thought about it, and when you look at how dominant, fetch lands are, and how even in standard, how we have to have Evolving Wilds has become kind of an evergreen card now that most sets have because you need that fixing. We shuffle our decks a lot. And when you're shuffling a lot, you definitely want my number 9, which is Kosi's Trickster. Kosi's Trickster is just 1 blue. It's a Merfolk Wizard, a 1/1. And whenever an opponent shuffles their library, you can put a +1/+1 counter on Kosi's Trickster. That adds up. Like, when you really think about it, look back at your last modern game or look back at your last legacy game and, your opponents are probably shuffling a great deal. And so this card seems like it can get pretty decently big, and then when you combine it with the Lords, you combine it with the Invasion, this is a really, really solid 1-drop, which is very important in tribal decks. And, we really don't see it too much anymore. But for a while there, that was one of the 1-drops you wanted to have.
I mean, it's kind of incremental value. But starting as a 1-mana 1/1 can get much, much larger. I mean, if you're on the play, obviously, and you play this and you're like, please fetch land. I mean, that's a thing. This is one of those cards that was very exciting at the time because like, oh man, enemy colored fetches. We've never had that before. That's really sweet. And it's kind of weird to kind of look back and go like, wow, we really didn't have enemy colored fetches until Zendikar. Yeah. And now we just got them everywhere all the time in all these old formats and stuff. But I believe at one point we discussed doing top 10 Merfolk, and we said something like, well, Ixalan's coming, and it's going to be a tribal block with Merfolk, so let's see exactly what's coming out in there. And I'm glad we did, because this is one from Rivals, and one of my favorite cards to play in terms of Singleton, one of my favorite decks to draft in terms of Rivals Draft, if I get the chance to open it. It's just an incredibly powerful card, and will steamroll you to death. If you have a advantage, this guy just pushes the pedal all the way down. Kumena, Tyrant of Oraska, is a damn fine Merfolk. It is a green-blue and a generic mana for a 2/4 mythic legendary Merfolk Shaman. It has 3 separate abilities, because why not? You tap another untapped Merfolk to give it so it can't be blocked this turn. You tap 3 untapped Merfolk to draw a card, and you tap 5 untapped Merfolk to be able to put a +1/+1 counter on each Merfolk you control. So, wow. A few tokens here and there, tapping for cards, tapping for +1/+1 counters, tapping you're dead.
Yeah. I remember when I worked for Card Hoarder, I used to write these little articles before events kind of talking about the teams, because we had a team at the time, and I would talk about the team's thoughts about the sealed set. And I remember they were getting ready to go to a GP where, Rivals Sealed was being played. And this, along with Tetzelmach, those were cards that were seen as just kind of being unbeatable, where like if you opened them, you just kind of felt like you didn't really have any choice. Like those were just very, very powerful cards that you either didn't have very many answers to, or you felt like you needed them right away, or they'd run away with the game. A lot of people were wondering, what they were going to give Merfolk, because it was obvious that they wanted Merfolk to be a tribe. We know how Merfolk operates in older formats with sort of a critical mass of lords, but, we got 1 lord, maybe 2, but like we didn't have them at the same expense level in the same way that we're used to. So people wondered what they were going to give us to really help push Merfolk over the top. And Kumena was very obviously the thing they wanted people to use to make Merfolk a thing. And, it's also fringe play. People tried to make Merfolk happen competitively, but it didn't really take off, sadly. There's still time. But yeah, I think if there is going to be a Merfolk deck, it needs to include Kumena, because when, like you said, when he's on the board, you're just playing a whole different game.
This is the
Also
part.
important to note that the tap abilities of Kumena are, you can use Kumena to tap for its own abilities the turn that it comes into play. So you can go turn 1 Merfolk, turn 2 Merfolk, turn 3 Kumena, and leave them all untapped and draw a card at the beginning of your opponent's end step or something along those lines to be able to recoup some of that card advantage. Just an incredibly powerful engine all in one.
So, as Wizard has told this story multiple times, this is what I would expect to happen. In next year's core set, there's going to be something ridiculously awesome for Merfolk decks. It's going to be the missing piece that you always needed for Kumena and the other lord. It's probably going to be another Merfolk lord that's super aggressively costed or whatever, because they always like to give you that little tiny window where your deck is just supercharged, you know?
Zombies too, yeah.
You remember they gave us Rancor with Infect? Like, this is the whole thing all over again. It's like you get 3 months to just go hog wild with your sick tribal deck, and there's going to have some insane tribal
3 months with both Elvish Mystic and Llanowar Elves in Standard.
Yep.
You get 3 months with Rancor and Infect in Standard. And so now you'll get Merfolk, Mistwalker alongside another Merfolk Lord or something like that.
Oh, man. I look forward to it. I hope that's the case.
Yeah.
Merfolk decks are fun to play. Like, there is that mono blue kind of, get under it, dive down, using those tricks type stuff.
Look at you with the Vorthos diving down like a fish.
Well, there's also a card called Dive Down.
Yeah.
They give us +1/+3 and hexproof and wrecks your opponent's plans, which is great.
Yeah.
But, so that was my number 9, which means we're going to get to move on here to number 8. And because it is an even number, not me.
Oh.
Wow.
Higher on someone else's list. Ruben, what's your number
Evan
8?
can't even this week.
That's 100% correct. I cannot even.
Evan can't even.
Unbelievable.
What's number 8, Ruben?
Once again, a very powerful card that has won Pro Tours in the past. Has won a Pro Tour in the past. And in fact, this deck dominated the Pro Tour in which it was played. Devotion to Blue, as it's often referred to, or Blue Devotion, had a lot of interesting pieces to it that made it work. But one of the most important pieces was one of their 2-drops. Alongside Frostburn Weird was the card Tidebinder Mage. Tidebinder Mage is originally from Magic 2014. It is a 2/2 for blue Merfolk Wizard. When Tidebinder Mage enters the battlefield, tap target red or green creature an opponent controls. That creature doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as you control Tidebinder Mage. Even at its worst, those 2 blue pips on a 2/2 body allowed you to power out early Thasses and allowed you to get card advantage off of your Bident of Thasses and made your Master of Waves that much more potent later in the game. They also grew your Cloudfin Raptors and allowed you to be an aggressive mono-blue strategy. But at its best, it was able to tap down things like Pelucranos and an active Perforos and big red and green monsters on the other side of the board. Even if you removed it as soon as it came into play, those creatures were tapped down for a good little while, either one combat or for an entire turn. Tidebinder Mage for just 2 mana, just one of the most efficient cards that's ever been printed as a Merfolk.
Sometimes sees modern sideboard play. You can vial this thing out and tap down a Tarmogoyf or something like that. And so, this is another one of those, we talk about sometimes how they just don't make answers like they used to, specifically targeting certain colors. And so this is one of the few times where Wizards really gave us a bit of a hoser, where it's like, this is something that can specifically go after 2 different colors and kind of keep them tapped down for you. And kind of doing, I also mentioned earlier, this is sort of what blue is more known for, as opposed to just raw destruction, more of a, kind of freezing something, keeping it tapped down. And so very flavorful, and just filling a niche that's very good for blue.
Yeah, this is the kind of card that they would give you in next year's core set to help push, Merfolk to the next level of, well, if it does something like this, red or green, we're in Ravnica, everything's multicolor, so it's going to hit a ton of creatures. These are the type of reprints or type of cards that can really push you over the edge. And this card in and of itself was really sweet. And super brutal. There was, back in those days in the 2014s, they kind of leaned in a little bit on the color hate, and this was part of that package.
Yeah.
Aaron, what's your number 8?
I love my number 8. My number 8 is from Rivals of Ixalan. We talked about how Rivals of Ixalan really gave us some green Merfolk there, and this is one of my favorites. I love to play this in my Muldrotha EDH deck. I would not be surprised if this saw standard play, because it's a great way to kind of push your graveyard into overdrive. I love to attack somebody in Commander, and I'll just say, like, can you block that for me? Can you kill that for me? And then they'll look at my graveyard, and they'll look at me, and they're like, I'll take the 3. My number 8 is World Shaper. So World Shaper is 3 colorless and a green. It's this creature Merfolk Shaman, 3/3, 3 power, 3 toughness. Whenever World Shaper attacks, you may put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. Cool. When World Shaper dies, put all land cards from your graveyard into the battlefield tapped. And so I'm really okay with you block this. I'm really fine with you blocking it. And no one wants to block it. They want to let it through. And I'm like, why? But sometimes you get that friendly opponent who's like, fine. And then you're like, woo! And all your lands come back. And it's very important to note, it doesn't have to be the lands that it just milled. It can be any lands in your graveyard. So if you've been filling your graveyard regardless, and you have any lands in there, it kind of gives you the splendid reclamation effect. Or if you're running you happen to be running any Fleshbag Marauders, and you're like, I had to sacrifice a creature. Oh, fine. And so you sacrifice it and get all your lands back. And it's just a hilarious card in any sort of deck that wants to fill the graveyard. Obviously, we have Golgari shenanigans in this set, so there's room for this in sort of a black-green deck, but just a very fun card and just kind of puts your opponent in a weird position where you're like, well, I can block this and you get a bunch of lands, or I'll just take the 3.
I mean, this is one of those cards where I'm like, World Shaper? Is that the effect for a World Shaper? Is that like the one world? Like that seems like a very grandiose title, right?
Yeah.
And it's just like this 4-mana 3/3 that does some stuff with lands.
Rock my world, let me tell you.
I mean, it's on brand doing its thing. You know,
it's true. If you want to be putting stuff into the graveyard with Muldrotha or any of your other graveyard shenanigans, you can do worse than a World Shaper.
There you go. All right, so let's move on here to number 7. I have a number 7, and it is awesome. And it's awesome in the very best of ways. It is really difficult to explain how successful Dominaria was. Like, I can't, for real. Like, it makes Guilds of Ravnica look bad. That's how good Dominaria was. Dominaria was running like, I don't know, probably 1.5 times hotter. I mean, obviously things have changed, but like Dominaria was insane, and it was one of the best formats. It was one of the best limited formats ever, if not my favorite at this point. And let me tell you, I've played a lot of limited Magic, and it's as good as it gets. Mm-hmm. And Tatiova Benthic Druid was one of those cards that, man, you first picked that thing and you just rode it on. This is a quiet 6-drop. You don't play this and not play a land thereafter to immediately get value, because your opponent, if they have a removal spell, it's going right here. Tatiova Benthic Druid is a blue-green and 3 generic mana for a 3/3 uncommon legendary Merfolk Druid. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you gain 1 life and draw a card. Note, it is mandatory, so don't go too nuts with the crazy triggers if you're going to draw yourself out.
I've seen people do that.
Which you can do, not a may. But you know, this card is also very indicative of Dominaria. It was like, why was Dominaria so good? Well, first of all, it harkened back to the early days of Magic, so you had the old schoolers. You have the new schoolers because the power level on this thing is just ridiculous at uncommon. And then the gameplay in and of itself was just fantastic. Like, this card was terrific. It really helped push you in a certain direction, and every single color pair had a very specific thing they were trying to do. And blue-green was just sort of trying to card advantage you out and just draw all it could and just pump all of it could in the air. And Tatiova was amazing.
Yeah, this was a card that was fantastic and sealed, and a lot of commanders glommed onto it. You know, Simic is widely seen as the most popular color combination in Commander, and it's cards like this that, really push it over the top, and we'll talk about at least another one later, hint, hint. But this was a card that immediately the EDH fans were like, oh my God. And so, it's very, I've seen it in action, and it gets gross.
I've played with it a lot. She's awesome. Yeah.
There's typically when a set comes out, there will be what's called a uncommon mythic, where you just never see it get passed around the table. Tatiova was the uncommon mythic in Dominaria Draft. If you saw Tatiova, you would build your deck around it. It turned your Grows from the Ashes into Sphinx's Revelations. It just let you have an engine. You know, the whole thing that Blue-Green wants to be doing in Dominaria Draft is card flow. You have so much scry, you have so much incidental card advantage. All you want to be doing is just sort of keeping the engine running. And Tatiova is an engine in and of herself. Every land becomes a card in a life. Just an extremely potent, powerful card.
Yeah, this card was unbelievable, and it didn't live long. Usually, I'd get one. Sometimes
you gotta kill that thing. Yeah.
If I untap with Tatiova, it is very unlikely I lose that game.
I mean, I always played her as a 6-drop, where I would make sure that I could at least get one trigger.
Right, you play her, you play your land.
Which is what you should be doing.
Absolutely, folks. Play it right. Because tapping out and then getting her killed is just the worst feeling.
It's the worst. Not good.
It's worth holding out. Ruben, what's number 7?
My number 7 is one of my favorite cards from all time. Now, I'm going to get to exactly what the card is in a bit of a roundabout way. There are 2 people who have ever won a World Series of Poker event and a Magic the Gathering Pro Tour. One of them, of course, is Brock Parker. Brock Parker was a member of the Huey Jensen, Matt Lindy trio that won Pro Tour Boston. He's also won multiple bracelets. He's won 3 different World Series of Poker bracelets. The other one is a name you might not recognize as much. Sigurd Eskeland. Sigurd Eskeland won the 2500 mixed game, the 8-game mix in 2010, which is the 5 horse events plus triple draw and another Hold'em event and another Omaha pot limit event. But he also won a Pro Tour. He won Pro Tour New York in 2000 with a deck that they called Mono Blue Fish. And one of the cards that really took him to the top of the standings, one of the big pieces that helped him win, is a little old merfolk, Spell Shaper, from Mercadian Masks, named Waterfront Bouncer.
Jesus.
Waterfront Bouncer is a colorless and a blue merfolk Spell Shaper. It's a 1/1 common that was recently reprinted in Vintage Masters. And it has the ability to pay a blue and tap and discard a card, return target creature to its owner's hand. Just an extremely powerful effect. Also really good in the various madness kind of strategies. Really iconic art as well. Just one of the most
Literal bouncer.
Yeah, literal actual bouncer. Yeah. Staring at you through the screen. The Paulo Parente art just screams that hilarious cartoony fantasy element at you. I love me a Waterfront Bouncer, and I just think it's great.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. This is a cube staple. This is a card that can shut down the craziest, scariest, weirdest creatures of all time. Well, Waterfront Bouncer says to go home, you're going home. Like, you know, like if it ain't X-Proof or Shroud, like it's going to happen. And that's one of the powerful abilities in Cube, to have sort of the tempo decks where, you know, you can have your Doom Whisperers and your Tarmogoyfs or whatever, but like if all I do is just keep bouncing to your hand and I just keep getting you, that'll win you the game right there. This is a terrific design. Loved it. I don't think they've printed anything close to as good as this in terms of
absolutely not.
You know, a tempo type card of solving your opponent's creatures. Aaron, what's your number 7?
I have Dread returned some of the best creatures this game can offer. I have Dread returned an Ashen Rider. I've Dread returned a Griselbrand, an Iona a time or two, Alice Norn. But they can't all be great, and there's different definitions of great. And so, you know, I've Dread returned a lot of things in my day, but only recently have I discovered the joy of Dread returning this particular common from Apocalypse. My number 7 is Whirlpool Rider. So Whirlpool Rider is 1 in a blue. It's a creature type merfolk, 1 power, 1 toughness. When it comes into play, shuffle the cards from your hand into your library and then draw that many cards. So if you're playing Manaless Dredge, you really want to go ham. And one of the ways that you do that is you get the creatures into play and you dread return a Whirlpool Rider. And so if you have anything in your hand, you shuffle it back in and then you dredge. And you're running like 4 dread returns. And so you want to chain these until you're able to put enough of your graveyard into play. And ideally you spend your last dread return on a Flamekin Zealot or a Flayer of the Hatebound and you really have a good time. But yeah, I remember picking up Manaless for the first time and I was like, where's my target? Where's my big flashy win condition? And they were like, you're going to bring back a Whirlpool Rider a couple times. And I was just like,
excuse me?
It keeps you humble. And so I've been bringing a lot of these back from the graveyard lately, having a really, really good time. And it just can get out of hand very, very quickly. And so I'm a big fan. I'm a convert. And now I'm not ashamed to say I have reanimated a Whirlpool Rider.
Wow. I don't think, if I've read this card ever in my life, it's been
I've certainly
a while.
read this card before.
I missed Invasion blocks, so I never got a chance to play with them. So for all those blocks and those cards, I have to go back and like read Odyssey, you know, whatever was in Odyssey and Judgment and all that stuff. So yeah, this card seems really weird and in a world of Dredge, very breakable.
It's a great way to reset yourself a lot because sometimes, unfortunately, you might draw your Narcomoeba, which feels terrible. Or we've been testing Creeping Chill, where sometimes you draw them. Well, this lets you shuffle them back in. And so all those formerly dead cards, you may now be able to flip and use them the way that God intended. And so, yeah, it's a great card.
Wow.
Yeah. There's a whole bunch of Whirlpool creatures back in Apocalypse. The Whirlpool Warrior was the rare. The Whirlpool Drake was the uncommon. And the Whirlpool Rider, being a merfolk, is the one for this list.
Wow. The Whirlpool Warrior.
I have one of them in my Locust God deck, the one that has the red mana cost in the thing. Oh, yeah.
That's the Warrior. Yeah.
Yep.
That's
And
so
you can
cool.
essentially do it twice, which feels really good.
Wow, I can only
Yeah.
imagine. Jeez. Okay. Just get crazy up in here, shuffling our
Yeah.
hand in our library and stuff. All right. Well, we're moving here to number 6, and because this is a top 10 can even edition, I'm not doing anything on it. Ruben, what's your number 6?
Unfortunately, at number 6, I also can't even. This is the first higher on my list.
Aaron, you got a number 6?
I sure do. My number 6 is a staple of modern Merfolk. I think it might see play in older versions as well. The 3 mana tends to be a lot for legacy and vintage, but in modern, it's a staple. It can be used either offensively or defensively. It can be used as a way to give you more mana by untapping your lands or untapping your files or things of that nature. Or it can be used aggressively to tap down any blockers or tap down anything else that might have abilities you want to stop or anything like that. My number 6 is Marrow Regery. So Marrow Regery is 2 colorless and a blue. It's a Merfolk soldier, 2/2. Other Merfolk creatures you control get +1/+1. And then whenever you play a Merfolk spell, you may tap or untap target permanent. And so it's not hard to really get this thing going. Play a Lord, untap a land. Okay, now I have, essentially I've gained a mana of sort. Tap those 2 lands, play another thing, trigger, untap that. It can also be used to maybe play on your second main if you want to untap and have blockers, if you're trying to play a race with another aggressive deck. Just a very versatile card, and gives Merfolk a lot of options other than just simply turning them sideways. You can now choose to tap or untap things, even tapping maybe a Trinisphere, things that have to be tapped to work, essentially. This can sort of take that out of the game. And so really neat card. It opens up a lot of lines of play, and I really, really like it.
So I want you to imagine a world where this is on the battlefield. They've made spells that are also Merfolk and can be treated as Merfolk.
Like Architect's Will, for
so
example.
Not only is this card pumping the entire team, but not everybody, but probably mostly, but sometimes because it's a tribal block. But you also have on board a trick that can untap or tap a permanent. So, the complexity of Lore Unlimited, let me tell you, and this just goes on. And there's another creature that counts all the Merfolk. There's another one that doesn't untap. And here's another triggers on a spell. It's there is infinite things going on. This card was super powerful. This is my number 10, by the way, because I do think it is in the list of the top 10 Merfolk of all time. This is,
sure.
It's just weird. Again, the tap and untap the permanent. That's where it gets me. It's not necessarily a ramp spell, but it's a weird, I can play multiple spells in a turn because I'm able to untap my islands.
Tap their lands. They also, Oracle text changed it. So the card check says whenever you play, Oracle text now says cast. Doesn't even have to resolve. You can just be like, I'm just gonna whatever, just tap it.
Yeah, no matter what happens.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a very, very powerful card. A card that, again, this is one of the reprints that I could see them doing in Magic 2019 or 2020, where, this pushes the Merfolk deck over the edge, where they have the 2 mana Lord, they have the 3 mana Lord, then they have the 4 mana, play Kumena and go completely, nuts with it or whatever, because that's a possibility. That said, that's our number 6. So let's move on here to number 5. Ruben, what's your number 5?
Number 5 is the second higher on my list. So
wow.
just a little bit of a gap here for me.
Aaron, do you have a number 5?
Oh, we are going to be approaching my sitting out period. My number 5 and my number 4 are both higher. And those are the only 2 hires I have. So
okay, well, I will mark them
and
as such.
then you had to skip a lot, but at least you get number 5 to yourself.
All to myself. I can't even, but I do get to odd. I can't even, but I do get the odd one, as it were. My number 5 is just a legend amongst Merfolk. This is a Merfolk that I am expecting to be at Ruben's number 6 because the power level of this card is not to be disrespected. You have to say, look, when they brought this card back, everyone flipped out because the card advantage for Silvergill Adept is just amazing. And a core component, it got reprinted in Rivals of Ixalan, and everybody lost their minds. It was super exciting. Yep. Magali, of course, with the brand new artwork, which was amazing. Silvergill Adept was originally from Lorwyn. It's an uncommon Merfolk wizard for a blue and a generic mana, and it's a 2/1 that says as an additional cost to cast it, you reveal a Merfolk card from your hand, or you pay 3 generic mana. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card. So a 2 mana 2/1 that draws a card is good enough to see Legacy play.
Absolutely.
Is good enough to see play in any format in which you're playing little fishy guys, because it just doesn't get really any cheaper than that to have a cantrip and to have something aggressive ready to get you.
I have to say, though, there's nothing sweeter. Your opponent's in a bad spot, when they got to pay for that silver gill. When you're
Yeah.
like, oh, girl,
They got to pay 5.
what is your life right now? Whether they had to mulligan or whatever the case might be, but you can always tell when you're just like, oh, honey.
But you still will. Yeah. You still will, and it will still feel good to draw a card off this guy. It's just just hasn't how it works.
Yeah, this was the card that when the tribes were announced, people were kind of asking themselves what the decks would need to kind of make them a thing, and this was the card that once it was revealed, people were like, that's the stuff right there. We got this, we got our lords, and this is fine. And it really hasn't happened yet. Again, there's still time. Maybe with the next core set, maybe in standard. Standard is really, really sweet right now. I think there's still room there. But this was one of the cards that people identified where if there's going to be a Merfolk deck, it has to be. This is the card that will do it.
Yep. This absolutely was my number 6. Just an extremely powerful card, a staple of the Legacy deck in particular. Playing it alongside of Aether Vial means that you get to bypass that restriction a lot of the time. It is the early 2-drop. If you don't want to put a Lord in harm's way, you're allowed to drop this first and then play a Lord afterwards. To be able to get in there for 3 or oftentimes more, depending on what your start is. Just an extremely powerful card. Almost won a Pro Tour. Very close did Merfolk come to winning a Pro Tour, of course, but Charles Gindy put it into that run from Jan Roos at Pro Tour Hollywood, and Silvergill Adept was a big part of that run as well. Hopefully it makes another run towards a Pro Tour top 8 at some point.
I guess we shall see. So that was the only number 5. Move on here to number 4. Aaron doesn't have one. Ruben, what's your number 4?
We love it when there are cards that birth language in the game. When you mill someone, it's because of Millstone. When you deal 3 damage, you bolt someone because of Lightning Bolt. And when you loot, it's because of Merfolk Looter.
Oh,
Merfolk Looter is my number 4.
Oh.
Originally from the Exodus expansion and reprinted a whole mess of number of times. Merfolk Looter is a colorless and a blue for a Merfolk Rogue, the 1/1 that says tap, draw a card, then discard a card. That's it. Very simple line of text. A good friend of mine, Adam Prozac, now a designer with Magic the Gathering, was fond of saying that he would rather loot than just draw a card. He would rather draw and discard than just have a card, which I thought was adorable. And Merfolk Looter was one of his favorite cards of all time. Anytime you see it in a Masters expansion, you can pretty much guarantee that he had some fingers on it. But if you see Thought Courier, you know he wasn't the man in charge of that set because he will not abide a Thought Courier when a Merfolk Looter could exist.
Wow. This is when I feel actively bad that I don't have on my list. I'm just like, oh my God, how did I miss that?
Well, we get to talk about it now.
We still do.
Was a part of Ralph Levy's breakout performance at Pro Tour Chicago in 1999, one of the most broken top 8s of all time, and he still managed to make top 4 with the weird 5-color good stuff survival of the fittest deck that had a couple copies of Merfolk Looter, obviously a part of the various Madness decks alongside Psychotog or without Psychotog in the blue-green version. Just a really powerful, potent card in all sorts of limited environments, early pick all the time. Merfolk Looter, well deserving of a spot here in the top 5.
Wasn't it also a piece of I think something with LSV? Like, didn't he do like a riddle or like a what would you do that like captivated Twitter of like, didn't it involve Merfolk Looter and was like, what would you, don't leave me hanging. Wasn't there?
I think so.
It sounds familiar.
And you either which one would you discard or which one would you keep or how would you do that? And I remember it was all the community talked about. I think we talked about it in one of our shows.
There was, would you loot question?
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was just this huge riddle that everyone was talking about. And it was like, and I remember we debated it. I think it might have even been a red zone of just this whole thing about what would you do with this card?
Wow. I mean, Merfolk Looter, a staple of all of the cubes. I mean, it just sees infinite play because it's seriously good. Wizards is not going to give us this anymore. The best we got is our Rummaging Goblins, which requires discarding first. You don't get to draw first.
Discarding first and costing 3.
Yeah, instead of costing 2. This effect has been looting from the get-go and will stay looting, which is awesome. All right, going to move on here from our number 4 into the top 3 Merfolk on our list. Aaron, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is an exciting card that even saw a bit of standard play. It takes a lot for a 6-drop to see standard play, especially in like a 2 or 3 color deck. Like, you got to be really, really good. But in Return to Ravnica Standard, anything was possible. And so we were in a format with cards like Restoration Angel, with Thrag Tusk, and so this card fit in really, really nicely with those cards. And Evan, you mentioned earlier when Wizards sometimes gives us those 3 happy months before rotation where you can kind of do whatever you want, and this card definitely fit into that. Also sees a lot of play in Commander. Simic is one of the most popular color combinations, if not the most popular, and this card certainly fits into that. Card was great in Standard, but when you compare it to, or when you pair it with things that can make it in Commander, things you have available in Commander, it can become just broken. My number 3 is Prime Speaker Zagana. So Zagana is 2 colorless, 2 green, and 2 blue. She's a legendary creature, Merfolk Wizard. She's just a low 1/1, just ain't nothing to worry about. Zagana enters the battlefield with X +1/+1 counters on it, where X is the greatest power among other creatures you control. And when she enters the battlefield, you draw cards equal to her power. So when you were able to do blink shenanigans, like say with Restoration Angel, you now have, whoop, there's 3 cards. Whoop, gate a bunch, gets cards, get your counters. Then she's kind of already done her thing. Whoop, blink her back, do it again.
Yeah.
Card is just ridiculous. And then you pair her, you put her in Commander with a lot of cheaper, other effects like that. And she just gets out of hand very, very quickly, drawing that many cards. And sometimes just having just a big body afterwards is really relevant. She famously replaced Momir Vig as the leader of the Simic after that whole thing went down. I'm really, really excited to see what's going to shake down in the coming Ravnica sets, the upcoming sets, because we do know there's still at least 3 other guilds there that are leaning more towards Bolus. And so I'm wondering if she's going to be them, or we're going to have some fishy heroes. And so I'm really excited to see what's going on there. Very memorable introductory story too, where she kind of addresses the guild and gives this kind of watery speech, and it's cool. And so I think this is a really neat take on Simic, and just a very powerful, big body card that does some fun things and even some broken things sometimes.
This was my number 8. Because I have played this Prime Speaker Zagana was one of the Commander decks that was handed to me when I kind of sat down one day with the Commander players at Cool Stuff, and I was like, "Oh, can I play Commander today?" And they're like, "Here you go, here's a Zagana deck," and it was ridiculous. I finished the game with like my deck in my hands. Yep. There's a million mana everywhere. Everything's dead. I'm like, what?
Just woo.
What did I do?
Yeah. And it's no wonder that blue-green is the most popular of the Commander combinations because of the interaction of the powerful effects between the mana and the creatures in green and the card draw and the spells of blue just mesh together so well in that format.
Yeah, this card is super fun. I'm not sure if it's still in the powered cubes these days, but if it is, I certainly wouldn't be surprised because I know it was in mine for a very long time. In that this effect is just huge. If you have almost anything anything larger than like a bear, and it seems unbelievable. So
I was going to say, what is the minimum number that you need to get Prime Speaker Zagana to?
3 minimum.
Like 3 counters or a 3/3?
3 counters.
3 counters. So a 4/4, draw some. Yeah, okay.
I don't think you have to get too greedy with her.
Right. Just an elephant or whatever. Elefante, if you will.
Sure.
And she's good to go. All right. So Ruben, what's your number 3?
My number 3 is the last hire on my list.
Aha. Okay. Well, that's cool. So that means I get to finish out number 3. This is a terrific card that saw play basically the instant it was printed. And if Scryfall will help me out, bring it up. Thank you. It was a card that for a very long time was only printed once, and as a result got sort of one of those uncommons only printed once things where it starts costing like 10, 12, 15, whatever dollars because you just can't find them. And finally in Masters 25, complete with the watermark, Curse Catcher shows up again. Curse Catcher is 1 blue. It is an uncommon from Shadowmoor, a 1/1 Merfolk Wizard, and it has 1 ability on it that says sacrifice it, counter target instant or sorcery spell, unless its controller pays 1 generic mana. And that is good enough, particularly in the older formats, to just mess up whatever your opponent is trying to do to a crazy degree. Saw plenty of play. As I recall, it saw plenty of play when it was in Standard. But it was certainly the older formats that really shined and said, this is exactly the type of card that we need to disrupt and also be a Merfolk and get pumped with all the lords and all the other stuff to make it to the top 8.
Yeah, this is the marquee one drop alongside Aether Vial in the Merfolk decks. Being able to vial in a Curse Catcher feels like cheating. Being able to come down on turn one and then immediately pump it up with one of your Lord effects and get in there with your Bear is spectacular. This effect has been super popular all the way back to Spiketail Drake. Or Spiketail Drakeling, maybe, or Hatchling.
Hatchling.
Spiketail Hatchling, which had a very similar effect and even cost 2.
Well, it was 4 spike.
Just familiar, one back-to-back Pro Tours, I think, in different types of decks. This effect has been super powerful all the time, all the way through its lifespan, and Curse Catcher being the poster child, the real standard bearer for the 1-mana disruptive sacrificable counterspell.
This was my number 4, and let's not forget, for those playing along at home, that sacrificing it exiles Bridge from Below. So
right.
Yeah. So do you know how many bridges I've lost to this card in Legacy? I think I'm going to cast my little Faithless Looting. Nope, don't bother, because you'll lose your bridges. That's a thing. Also, Modern Ad Nauseam. This can be kind of the bane of my existence, where I got I'm all ready to go. I got my mana ready. I'm going to do my little Ad Nauseam. It's one more turn to go. And then like, whoop, and I'm like, fine, one more. And I got to save up another mana. And then another one drops. And I'm like, fine, 2 more. Like, it just adds this little volley attacks, and I'm like, stop it.
Yeah,
a card that and this is awesome, sort of to imagine that if in Magic 2020 what they had was Spiketail Hatchling, which is a blue and a generic mana for a 1/1 flyer, sacrifice it, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. Now that's just straight up 4 spike, not the instant or sorcery, just 4 spike as a Merfolk. Instead of a Drake, it's a Merfolk.
And instead of, they couldn't give it flying, right?
Why not?
All right.
This is funny. I'll enter the Mike Turian school of why not? And I'm like,
oh, no.
He's like, why not print a 1-mana 2/1 flyer?
And I'm flying, and there's the 2/1 that if you have another Merfolk, it gains flying for whatever that's worth. So yeah, why not?
Make it rare, make it a chase card, make it make Merfolk awesome.
I will say I do like faking out Merfolk players where they'll play their Curse Catcher and they're so proud of themselves, and I'm like, oh yeah, girl, you get that Curse Catcher. And then I have like a Simian Spirit Guide waiting, and so like they'll do something because they think they think I need one more turn. I'll be like, whoop, Ad Nauseam, and they're like,
yeah. Paying for days with a Simian Spirit Guide is the best feeling in the world.
And they're just like, oh, Curse Catcher, gotcha.
Like, no, you didn't. Still super good.
It's my number 4, in case I forgot to say.
There you go. So moving on here to let's see, number 2 for our lists here. I don't have one again. I am not evening this episode. Thank you very much. Ruben, what's your number 2?
As I mentioned, only 4 Merfolk have ever won a Pro Tour. I talked about Galena's Knight, I talked about Waterfront Bouncer, I talked about Tidebinder Mage, but now it's time to talk about the Master, okay? The Master of Waves is the Merfolk that I have at my number 2 position. Master of Waves. You're number 5?
And my number 4.
Nice. You're number 4. There we go. Well, we're all up here. 3 colorless and a blue gets you a 2/1 Merfolk Wizard. Boy, that's not a good rate if that's all it does. Luckily, it also has protection from red, and elemental creatures get +1/+1. That's a weird line of text. I wonder if that is relevant for any reason. When Master of Waves enters the battlefield, create a number of 1/0 blue elemental creature tokens equal to your devotion to blue. So Master of Waves oftentimes will come down with a devotion to blue of 5 or 6. Even just itself is 1, so you're getting at least 2 2/1s thanks to your Master of Waves. But if you happen to have a Cloudfin Raptor or a Frostburn Weird or a Nightveil Spectre or something along those lines, you are getting a whole mess of devotion and a whole mess of 2/1 elemental little wave horsey beasts. That you can, if you untap with them and you're able to go to your next turn, you're attacking for like 12, 16 on the next turn. Master of Waves very responsible for ending games on turn 5 a whole lot of the time. Just an extremely powerful, awesome option.
Yeah, the protection from red is very relevant. It was relevant in Standard. It's especially relevant in Modern, a format that sees a lot of bolts and terminates and things like that. This is a really nice way for the Merfolk decks to kind of go wide, because sometimes you're facing another creature deck and they kind of match you creature for creature. And if, God forbid, you don't have the Island Walk yet, you really are forced to kind of play the attacking and blocking game, and this is a really great way to kind of overwhelm them with these creatures. It's very easy to, you look at that 1 toughness and you think, okay, fine, Dark Blast, something like that. With the Lords, it's very easy to get out of the range of things like that, and so it's very difficult. You can Fatal Push it, but you need the Revolt to do that.
Right.
Thing. It plays really well with Mutavault, which the Merfolk decks also love to run, because whatever you're playing counts as a Merfolk and a chain and the Elemental, I believe, and so that's a thing. And so it just fits in really, really nicely. It's a very great way for the Merfolk decks to go wide. And that's another one of those cards. We've had several cards on our list that I think people have to remind themselves are Merfolk. Or like you look at it and you're like, that's a Merfolk. Okay.
That's weird.
And you just don't immediately think of it. But yeah, especially very scary when you can vial it out. You get your vial high enough and whoop, instant army. Very scary.
For those who don't know, devotion is each blue in the mana cost of permanents you control counts towards your devotion to blue. So you see all the pips, as they call the mana symbols, and you get all the what should be 2/1s. And of course, if they can kill the master, they kill all of the tokens, which is a really interesting kind of way to put that. Making 1/0 tokens. They've never done that before, and they've never gone anywhere close since. I thought that was cool. And this was the card that broke it open for Team Star City Games at Pro Tour Theros.
Yeah, and Team TCG player as well.
Yeah. I mean, like the word essentially kind of got out. It was like, wait a minute, devotion is completely insane, and this is sort of one of the best creatures to take advantage of that. Also, one of the last times that Wizards was using protection at all. They don't want to use protection from any color. They like hexproof from colors, which is really interesting, but isn't quite as overbearing, whereas Goblin Chain Whirler is never going to kill this guy. Whereas if it had hexproof from red, Goblin Chain Whirler could still kill it. Couldn't target it or whatever, but you could kill it that way. But Master Waves, again, it's in all of our lists for a reason, because this card is awesome. All right. Aaron, what's number 2?
My number 2 is a card that was a staple of standard control decks back in Return to Ravnica block. Saw a lot of play with cards like, again, Restoration Angel was a staple of the format. This fit in very nicely with it. Control decks at the time, or even just mid-range decks, might run 4 of these 4 Resto Angels and kind of call it a day, maybe some Snapcaster Mages or something. Has since carried over into Pauper, is now kind of a Pauper all-star, which we might have talked about on our top 10 Pauper list, and we just won't ever get it again. We get Omen Speaker now, which is cute. But it's definitely not this, because this was miles ahead of that card. It's no surprise that Pauper has adopted it. My number 2 is Augur of Bolas. So Augur of Bolas is 1 colorless and a blue. It's a creature type Merfolk wizard, 1 power, 3 toughness. When Augur of Bolas enters the battlefield, look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal an instant or sorcery card from among them and put it in your hand, put the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. With any sort of blinking shenanigans, which is also a thing in Pauper, there's a lot of blinking things you can do, returning things to your hand. You're able to manipulate this card and really get a lot more value out of it than just sort of the one-time use. The 3 toughness is very relevant. Control decks often struggle against fast aggro decks, mono red, little 1/1s, 1/2s, 2/1s. This is a really great blocker in addition to that. And if you have a way to, just kind of bide yourself some time until you do what you want to do. And if you have to, it's still got 1 power, so you can attack if you need to. Just a very versatile card. And I think it says a lot that we don't, it looks harmless enough, but when you look at the things we've been given since, you realize just how powerful it is and that we won't probably ever get it again.
Yeah, this is one of those cards where you're like, first of all, thank you, Modern Masters 2017, for putting this into Pauper. Because I played this card an absolute ton. This card is a huge card advantage card where you're able to, again, blink it, do things with it, and just block. Like 2 mana 1/3s are necessary to not lose against aggressive decks. And this is not only that, but it gets you like, a counter spell, a removal spell. And if it doesn't, it usually filters some lands to the bottom or some things you weren't looking for. So this was my number 6. Was just outside my top 5 because this card.
This was my number 5.
Nice.
I was just amazed. I remember when we were making our Pauper list, I was amazed at how this card exploded in Pauper. Like I was just going through deck list after deck list, and I was like, all right, it's in this deck. Let's look at this. Oh, it's in this
if
deck
you're
too.
playing,
okay, well, it's not going to be in this deck. And I pull up the next deck, and I'm like, Jesus! Like it really has kind of made a huge impact.
If you're playing blue, you're probably playing Augur of Bolas.
Yep. And even before it was popular in Pauper, it was a standard standout. It was really popular in the blue-white flash decks that were popular the first time that it came around. Also were in those Jeskai decks. Esper Control used it. It's just kind of always been around ever since it was originally printed. But of course, dropping down to common level means that it's a super powerhouse in Pauper, where you see it in all of the Delver variants, all of the Tireless Tribe combo decks, even all the mid-range decks tend to use it, the Teachings decks, just to be able to garner a little bit of early defense and card advantage for low cost.
All right, so we're moving on here to our number 1 Merfolk, and I think through powers of deduction and not being able to even this episode, I'm pretty sure I know what Ruben's number one is, and I'm fairly certain on what Aaron's number one is as well, but we'll see. Ruben, tell us what your number one is.
Well, I share a number one.
Ooh.
Aaron, do you share a number one?
I do. Are you the one I share it with?
I imagine so.
Okay. All right.
Wow. Well, what's your all's number one?
Do you want to go first, or should I?
Well, I can. I mean, if I had my druthers, I would have chosen Ariel, Princess of the Deep, daughter of King Triton, youngest of the sisters, and heir to Prince Eric's kingdom as the number one merfolk of all time. But in lieu of her not having a magic card, I guess I will settle for one of the most broken creatures that's ever been printed.
Wait, you're talking about Leviathan? You guys both pick Leviathan?
Yeah, we both picked
like
Leviathan.
As an honorary merfolk? You guys are crazy.
We shared it.
Wow.
We shared Leviathan as our pick.
Wow.
Just an extremely potent card, particularly in Legacy, where it is a staple of the various Stone Blade variants because of a very important line of text that says that it has protection from the chosen player. Our collective number one is True Name Nemesis.
I think Ariel said it best. What would I pay if I could spend a day with protection from you? So True Name Nemesis is 1 colorless and 2 blue. It's a Merfolk rogue, 3 power, 1 toughness. When True Name Nemesis enters the battlefield, choose a player. And some players will actually make you choose the player, even though it's clear like who you're going to be choosing. So that's
I will sarcastically ask my opponents, who are you choosing?
So be careful that you don't accidentally choose yourself. And as protection from the chosen player, there was a time where commander decks used to spit out these eternal staples. Accidentally, I'm under the impression. That wasn't the intention. But we got Containment Priest in Commander 2014. We got this card in Commander 2013. We really haven't had that in recent commander sets, I don't believe. I know people like me are usually looking and trying to find that next staple. And I do feel like there has been more of a push to not really do that anymore because that led to certain boxes being sold before others and all sorts of a mess. But this was the card that really, I think, made the biggest bust out in older formats. When you do pair this with something like a Stoneforge Mystic and you do slap a Batter Skull on it, that's really frightening. You're slapping a Jit on it. This is the reason why, cards like Toxic Deluge or even Marsh Casualties sometimes see play because you need a way to deal with this. A lot of the tools in Legacy are the Lightning Bolts, the Abrupt Decays, the Swords to Plowshares. That's sort of the answer to a lot of things. And, that protection from a player is really, really relevant. I have lost games where I've had a great board state and just couldn't block a True Name Nemesis, and that has eventually chewed away at me. Slapping equipment on it's a really good time. Very, very scary card. And when you used to pair it with Deathrite Shaman, this was one of the cards in the check pile decks. Before Deathrite Shaman was banned, you would run this Kolagon's Command and Wasteland and Leovold because why not? Because the mana was so good. Getting a turn 2 True Name is terrifying and just a very powerful card. And I'm under the impression it was just so not there was definitely I got a feeling from the Wizards folks, it was like, we didn't know.
as I understand it, there was an actual deliberate push to put some legacy, very old. Because what they were trying to do is they said, well, this is so casual of a product, we got to give the constructed players something, right? And wow, did it blow up in their face? And this was the one. This was the one where you're like, oh my god, what did you do?
Yeah.
Everyone is buying this one deck, and it's just this one deck worth $50, $80, $100, prices started to go completely haywire.
Yeah.
And they finally reprinted it in Battle Bond. Mm-hmm. And this is just one of those cards that is unbelievable. This is my number 2, by the way. So I clearly have
rare Merfolk that the tribe really doesn't even matter. The Merfolk decks can play it, but this is a deck that often by itself. Another one of those cards you have to remind yourself, oh, that's a Merfolk.
It's also a rogue, unless we forget if you need to be triggering your morsel thefts and noggin whacks in your casual rogue prowl decks.
Oof.
You're playing True Name Nemesis in.
Noggin whacking. True Name Nemesis, again, in and of itself, is just so powerful. You gain protection from anything they try to do. Can't be blocked, targeted, dealt damage, or enchanted. Nothing deals with True Name Nemesis.
Anything short of a Wrath effect or a Toxic Deluge or a Sacrifice.
It's tough.
How bad do you feel to cast a Terminus just for this? Girl, what you doing? This is the definition of fixing a toaster with a sledgehammer, where it's you got the one True Name, fine, I'll burn a Terminus on it.
Sometimes you got to 1-for-1 that stuff, because it will kill you really, really quickly. Well, that brings me, and again through the powers of elimination here. I think this is Ruben's number 3 and this is Aaron's number 5 because I'm kicking it old school.
Oh no, but mine were already claimed.
Oh, what was your number 5?
My 5 is Master Waves. I said it.
Oh, I'm sorry. I missed that. I didn't get that
That's
on.
fine.
Therefore, this is Ruben's number 3 because we're kicking it old school. You're going to go, look at this is, this is old man magic talking here. When I learn, you kids, your true names and whatever, don't give a crap. Back in my day, when I learned what magic was, what magic is, here's the tribes. What is a tribe? How do they work? What are they supposed to work? Someone handed me a Lord of Atlantis and said, this is Merfolk. And I was like, oh, Lord of Atlantis is 2 blue for a 2/2 that is a rare from all the way back in Alpha. And it's a Merfolk Lord, and other Merfolk get +1/+1 and have Island Walk. Now, they've since more or less fixed this because, again, this pumps your opponent's creatures as well if they're Merfolk. So that kind of gets weird. Island Walk, they also didn't like. So it was what, Master of the Pearl Trident? Is that correct? That
was it's the new one.
That was the new one. Again, it just kind of fixes the, only my stuff gets pumped, not your stuff gets pumped. But Lord of Atlantis, again, this to me is where Merfolk come from. What is Merfolk and how do they work and what makes them a tribe and what puts the glue together? And from the very start of Magic the Gathering, Lord of Atlantis was there, and it's still powerful enough. Its effect is powerful enough to have that effect be known today. It doesn't go away.
It's iconic enough to you associate that with Merfolk. And when you think of a Merfolk deck, you immediately say to yourself, where's the Lord? We talked about them trying to make it a thing in Standard. Elves is known for having a couple of Lords, but more importantly, the snowball type effect or the elf ball effect of, elves are known for kind of making a lot of mana and then either making more elves or making really big creatures like a Craterhoof Behemoth. When you think of Merfolk, you think of this critical mass of the Master of the Pearl Tridents, the Lord of Atlantis, the Miro Regeries, taking these creatures that by themselves are not very good, but when you add them all up, you have a very, very scary force behind you. And this card is really what you think of when you think of Merfolk. You think of the big creatures, you think of the evasion. Even if you don't have islands, well, here's a spreading season, now you do. And so now that Island Walk is very, very relevant. It's funny, I kind of wanted to do a little bit my cheaty face thing. I was going to pick a card to make the list that wasn't technically a Merfolk, but also Kira Great Glass Spinner. Yeah. She's in all the Merfolk decks. And so a lot of people just assume she's a Merfolk, but she was going to be my number 1 before I realized she wasn't a Merfolk and you guys would kill me. But yeah, this is iconic. You can't have Merfolk without the Lords, and this is the best it gets.
Of course. It's another one where when you say that a creature is a Lord, that's because of Lord of Atlantis.
Yeah.
You have things like Lord of the Unreal and Lord of the Undead and Lord of the Accursed and Goblin Lord, and it's all thanks to Lord of Atlantis being the first one. Obviously, coming back as an iconic piece as a time-shifted card in Time Spiral as well. Been reprinted a huge number of times, in like 6th and 7th edition. Been reprinted in Time Spiral and even birthed the Lord of the Pearl Trident as sort of a homage as well as a second piece to that same deck. Well deserving of a number 1 slot on someone's list.
The artwork is just so lush. Melissa Benson, one of the original artists, you look at that tail and you look at not only the texture of the tail and the, the thickness of the tail, the girth of the tail, and then you look at the fan going around it, it just looks so real. Like it almost seems like it has depth and like you could touch it. And the art is just gorgeous. I'm just looking at this art and I'm like, and it's funny, but at first I'm looking at the original and it said Summon Lord of Atlantis. And so that had to be changed to Summon Merfolk. And so that's a cute little errata there. But yeah, gorgeous card. Fun story about this card. I used to date somebody who played Merfolk. And I remember when we first started dating, he had white bordered Lords. And I was like, listen, I'm going to pal around with you. Like, I'm not. And sure enough, a couple months later, he's like, I love you, here are my black bordered Lords. And I'm like, thanks.
Man, Alpha and Beta currently in the $300-esque range.
All those cards are going nuts.
I mean, and by the time you hear this, the prices are probably gone up or whatever. Nothing. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry, just $400. Never mind. It doesn't matter. Just pick a number, throw a dart.
All the older formats, any format where it's legal. Even Vintage has Merfolk decks pop up every once in a while. I think that a Merfolk deck won one of the Vintage championships several years ago.
It comes up in a Super League just to kind of spice it up a little bit, or just sometimes it's just a nice breath of fresh air in Vintage. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah, well, and you'll see it take down a tournament every once in a while. It's been a little while, but I would not be surprised to see Merfolk take down a Grand Prix here. I'm going to open there every once in a while. Always, always, always on the horizon. And Lord of Atlantis is a constant for of as to the reason why.
It has its devotees. You know, Corbin Hostler famously loves a good merfolk. There's a young man named Nikachu. There's a YouTube content creator. He's basically to Merfolk what I am to Dredge. Like, he literally just exclusively streams it in every format. He takes it to every GP. That's sort of his thing. And yeah, there's just a small little group of people that loves the fish, and they will play it good, bad, ugly. They love it.
Very nice. Well, that was our top 10 Merfolk cards. You will see them on the screen right now for your review. Take a look at my list, Aaron's list, Ruben's top 10, and we want to hear from you about what card we did not talk about, and we'll select our favorite to win a $50 gift certificate to CoolStuffInc.com. But before we go, I want to thank my co-host. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Ruben.
Thank you. I think we served fish today. Is that right?
Was all the fish served?
I need the youths to tell me if we're serving fish.
You definitely were looking very fishy today, Ruben. So
I will take it.
We are part of the Yeet fleet, I think is what the kids
Yeet
say.
fleet,
Nice.
good one,
Yeah.
good one.
Moving here to our final slide. I want to thank our sponsor, CoolStuffInc.com, our co-sponsor, CardOrder.com, my co-host, Aaron Campbell, and Ruben Bressler, you guys for watching and listening, and hope you support us at Patreon.com/MagicMikes. Follow, like, tweet, favorite, share, subscribe, do everything social that tells people we exist. Catch us online at Twitch.tv at Magic Mikes, on Twitter at Magic Mikes Cast, our Magic Mikes subreddit, and like the Magic Mikes page on Facebook. Talk to us privately at MagicMikesPodcast@gmail.com. Follow the audio-only podcast at Magic Mikes Podcast at Libsyn.com, or find us on iTunes, or join us here next week, same time, same place, for another episode of Magic Mikes. Good night, everybody.